After 7 straight 11-hour shifts, an exhausted young nurse quietly paid for an elderly patient's heart medication with money she barely had, expecting nothing in return. But days later, a stern-faced lawyer appeared asking for her by name, carrying a mysterious envelope, and she realized that a single act of kindness was about to change her life in ways she never could have imagined. Before we continue, tell us what time it is and where you're watching from, subscribe and hype, because tomorrow I've got something extra special for you. The rain had been falling for 6 days straight. Maya Reynolds pushed through the automatic doors of Pacific Shore Regional Medical Center, pulling her jacket tighter against the damp cold that seemed to seep through every layer. California winters were not supposed to feel like this. There was no snow, no crystalline beauty to soften the bleakness. Just endless gray rain, heavy clouds rolling in from the Pacific, and a bone-deep chill that made everything feel harder than it should. She had just finished her 7th consecutive shift, 11 hours each, 77 hours in 1 week. Her feet ached in a way that went beyond soreness, beyond fatigue. It was the kind of pain that settled into your bones and made you wonder how much longer you could keep doing this. The nursing station on the medical floor was quiet at this hour. Most of the evening admissions had been settled, medications had been distributed, charts had been updated. Maya allowed herself a moment to lean against the counter, eyes closed, listening to the steady beep of monitors down the hallway. "You look like you need about 3 days of sleep," said Jennifer, the night shift nurse coming on duty. Maya opened her eyes and managed a tired smile. "Try 3 weeks. When are you off next?" 2 more shifts, then finally 3 days off. Maya gathered her things from her locker, checking her phone out of habit. One new email notification caught her eye. Rent reminder. Due in 7 days. She felt the familiar tightness in her chest. $48,000 in student loans. Credit card maxed out except for maybe $187. The math was always there, running in the background of every thought, every decision. She was 29 years old and could not remember the last time she had felt financially secure. "Drive safe," Jennifer called as Maya headed toward the exit. "Roads are slick." The parking lot was nearly empty. Maya's Honda Civic sat alone under a flickering streetlight, rain streaming down its windshield in relentless sheets. She sat in the driver's seat for a long moment before starting the engine, watching the rain, feeling the exhaustion settle over her like a heavy blanket. Her apartment was only 15 minutes away, but tonight it felt like miles. The studio was small, drafty, and smelled faintly of mildew no matter how many times she cleaned. The heater rattled and wheezed but never quite managed to make the space warm. Maya kicked off her shoes, peeled off her damp socks, and stood in the tiny kitchen staring into her refrigerator. Leftover pasta from 3 days ago, half a sandwich, some wilted lettuce. She heated the pasta in the microwave and ate it standing up, too tired to even sit down. Her phone buzzed, a text from her mother in Ohio. "Hope you are doing well, honey. Let us know if you need anything." Maya stared at the message for a long time. Her parents would help if they could, but they were barely making ends meet themselves. Her father's disability check covered their basics, but there was nothing extra. There had never been anything extra. She typed back, "Doing great, talk soon, love you." The lie felt necessary. Kindness, sometimes, meant not burdening others with your own struggles. Maya set her phone down and moved to the window, looking out at the rain-soaked street below. Across the way, lights glowed warm in other apartments. She wondered if the people inside felt as alone as she did. If they were also counting dollars and days, wondering when things might finally get easier. She thought, not for the first time, about leaving nursing, about finding something, anything, that did not require this level of sacrifice. But then she would remember the patients, the ones who held her hand during frightening procedures, the ones who thanked her with tears in their eyes, the ones who had no one else. That was the trap, she supposed, caring too much to walk away, even when walking away might save you. Maya turned from the window and climbed into bed, still wearing her scrubs. She would shower in the morning. Right now, she just needed to sleep, to let the sound of rain against the window carry her away from the weight of everything, even if only for a few hours. Tomorrow would come soon enough, and with it, another shift, another round of impossible choices, another day of trying to hold together a system that seemed determined to break everyone inside it. Maya returned to Pacific Shore 2 days later for what would be her second-to-last shift before her days off. The rain had finally stopped, but the sky remained a flat, oppressive gray. The kind of sky that promised more rain was coming. She clocked in and checked her patient assignments. Room 314, Samuel Hartman, 74 years old, congestive heart failure, Admitted 4 days ago with severe fluid retention and difficulty breathing. Maya had cared for Mr. Hartman during her previous 2 shifts. He was one of those patients who made the job easier and harder at the same time. Easier because he was kind, patient, and never demanding. Harder because you could see the quiet resignation in his eyes, the way he had already accepted that life was winding down. "Good afternoon, Mr. Hartman," Maya said, entering his room with her medication cart. "How are you feeling today?" The elderly man was sitting up in bed, wearing a faded blue cardigan over his hospital gown. His white hair was neatly combed, and despite his obvious frailty, there was a gentle dignity about him. "Oh, I am fine, dear, just fine." He smiled apologetically. "I hope I am not being too much trouble." "You are no trouble at all," Maya assured him, checking his vitals. Blood pressure still elevated, heart rate irregular, oxygen saturation better than yesterday but not great. "How is your breathing?" "Better," he said. "Much better. Those water pills are working wonders." Maya noted the improvement in his chart, then prepared his afternoon medications. As she worked, she noticed the nearly empty water pitcher on his bedside table, the untouched lunch tray, the absence of any personal items except for one small framed photograph of a woman with kind eyes. "Is that your wife?" Maya asked gently. Mr. Hartman's face softened. "Yes, Evelyn. She passed 4 years ago. 46 years we had together." He picked up the photograph, holding it carefully. She was a teacher, elementary school, 2nd grade. The children loved her. "She looks like she was wonderful." She was. He set the photograph back down. "I miss her every day." Maya finished preparing his medications, then hesitated. There was something she needed to discuss, and she was not looking forward to it. Dr. Patel had been in that morning, and had expressed concern about Mr. Hartman's progress. The standard diuretic was helping, but not enough. His heart was still struggling, and there was a real risk of readmission within weeks if they did not get ahead of this. Dr. Patel had ordered a newer cardiac medication, one of the newer generation drugs that worked more efficiently to reduce strain on the heart and prevent fluid buildup. Studies showed it reduced hospital readmissions by nearly 40%, but it was expensive, very expensive. "Mr. Hartman, I need to talk to you about your medications," Maya began carefully. "Dr. Patel wants to start you on a new heart medication before you go home. It is more effective than what you are on now, and should help prevent you from having to come back to the hospital." "That sounds good," he said, his expression open and trusting. "The challenge is that it is a newer medication and fairly costly. About $165 for a 7-day supply to start. Medicare should cover it, but they need special prior authorization first, which can take 4 to 6 business days. The pharmacy needs payment up front to dispense it, and then Medicare will reimburse once the authorization comes through." She watched his face carefully. The smile faded, his hands resting on the blanket, tightened slightly. "I see," he said quietly. "How much would I need right now?" Maya checked the notes from the pharmacy. They would need the full $165 up front. Then once Medicare approves it, they will refund that amount to you. Mr. Hartman was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was smaller, more hesitant. "I have about $60 in my checking account until my next Social Security deposit. That comes in 9 days. Maya felt the familiar heaviness in her chest. This happened so often. Patients caught between what they needed and what they could afford. The system was not designed for people like Mr. Hartman. It was designed for people with resources, with family, with options. "Let me talk to the social worker," Maya said, keeping her voice steady and professional. "There are sometimes assistance programs that can help bridge the gap. And I will also check if the pharmacy can break it into smaller amounts so you can start the medication while we wait for Medicare." But even as she said it, she knew what she would find. The assistance programs were perpetually underfunded. Most had already exhausted their quarterly budgets. Mr. Hartman's income, modest as it was, would likely put him just above the threshold for emergency aid. She spent her lunch break tracking down answers. The social worker, a weary woman named Patricia, who looked as tired as Maya felt, confirmed what Maya had suspected. "No assistance available right now. The pharmaceutical company has a patient assistance program, but the application process takes 3 to 4 weeks. Patricia sighed. "And the pharmacy cannot partial fill this particular medication. Something about the dosing protocol. It is all or nothing." Maya sat in the break room afterward, staring at her phone. Her banking app was open. Checking account balance, $843. Savings account, $212. Credit card available, $187. Her paycheck would deposit in 6 days. That would be $912 after taxes. Rent was due in 7 days, $450. Car insurance would auto-pay in 9 days, $350. She needed groceries. She needed to put gas in her car. If she paid for Mr. Hartman's medication today with her credit card, she would have $22 available until the Medicare reimbursement came through. If it came through, Medicare approvals were usually reliable, but sometimes there were complications. Sometimes it took longer than 6 days. The sensible thing would be to tell Mr. Hartman they had done everything they could, that he would need to wait for his Social Security deposit, then pay for the medication himself, and wait for Medicare to reimburse him later. It would delay his treatment by over a week, which meant higher risk of complications, possible readmission. But that was not her problem to solve, except it was, because she was the one who would see him again in 2 weeks when he came back through the emergency room, sicker, scared, trapped in a cycle that could have been prevented. Maya thought about the photograph on his bedside table, about 46 years of marriage, about a man who apologized for existing, who wore a threadbare cardigan in a hospital room, who had no one to help him navigate this impossible situation. She thought about Evelyn, the second-grade teacher who had made children feel loved. She wondered if Evelyn would want her husband to go without necessary medication because of paperwork and waiting periods. Maya closed her banking app and sat for another moment, listening to the hum of the vending machine, the distant sound of call bells, the quiet conversations of other nurses on their breaks. She did the math one more time. If the Medicare reimbursement came through in 6 days, that would be the same day as her paycheck. She could transfer money between accounts, juggle things. It would be tight, painfully tight, but it was possible. And if the reimbursement was delayed, well, she had been behind on bills before. She would figure it out. Maya stood up and went to find her supervisor. Maya's supervisor, Karen, was a woman in her mid-50s who had been a nurse for 30 years. She had seen everything, survived every budget cut and staffing shortage, and maintained a core of compassion that somehow had not been worn away by decades of institutional frustration. "What is on your mind?" Karen asked, looking up from her computer. "Mr. Hartman in 314, Maya began. "The cardiac medication situation." Karen nodded, her expression sympathetic. "Patricia told me, no assistance available, none, and he cannot afford it until his Social Security comes in, which will not be for 9 more days. Dr. Patel wants him started on it before discharge, which is scheduled for tomorrow." Maya took a breath. "I want to cover it, just temporarily. Once Medicare approves the prior authorization, the pharmacy will refund the cost to whoever paid for it." Karen studied her carefully. "Maya, you know you are not required to do this." "I know. And you know the hospital cannot reimburse you if something goes wrong with the Medicare approval. You would be doing this entirely at your own financial risk." "I know that too. Can you afford this right now?" Karen asked directly. "I know how much we pay you. I know what student loans look like." Maya appreciated the directness. "It will be tight, but my paycheck comes in 6 days. If Medicare processes the approval in their usual time frame, the reimbursement should come around the same time. I can make it work." Karen was quiet for a moment, then sighed. "If you are certain, here is what you need to do. You cannot process this through the hospital pharmacy. That would create liability issues for everyone involved, and could actually get you in trouble with the nursing board. But after your shift, you can take the prescription to any outside pharmacy and pay for it yourself as a private citizen. Then you bring it back. We document it as patient-supplied medication, and we administer it according to the prescription." Maya nodded. The process was clear. The risk was hers alone. "Are you absolutely sure about this?" Karen asked, her voice gentle. "You work too hard as it is. You are running on empty. Nobody would blame you for saying no. Nobody would even know you were asked." "I would know," Maya said quietly, "and I would not be able to sleep tonight if I walked away. Some decisions are not really decisions. They are just reflections of who you are." Karen reached across her desk and squeezed Maya's hand briefly. "You are a good person, Maya Reynolds. Better than this system deserves. Just promise me you will take care of yourself too." "I promise." That evening, after her shift ended, Maya drove through the gray twilight to a pharmacy 3 miles from the hospital. The rain had started again, light but persistent. She waited in line behind a woman with 2 small children, and an elderly man buying cold medicine. When her turn came, she handed over Mr. Hartman's prescription. The pharmacist, a tired-looking woman, probably 10 years older than Maya, processed it efficiently. "This is a prior authorization medication," the pharmacist noted. "Do you have approval from the insurance?" "We are waiting on approval," Maya said. I will be paying out of pocket for now." The pharmacist nodded, unsurprised. This happened often enough. $164.80. Maya handed over her credit card. She watched the transaction process, watched her available credit drop to $22.20. The pharmacist bagged the medication and handed it over with a receipt. "Keep this receipt," the pharmacist advised. "When the prior authorization goes through, bring it back, and we can process the insurance reimbursement." "Thank you." Maya drove back to the hospital through the rain. She parked in the nearly empty lot and sat for a moment, holding the white paper bag, feeling the weight of what she had just done. It was not regret exactly, more like a quiet acknowledgement of reality. She had just spent money she could not afford to spend, on behalf of someone she barely knew, with no guarantee she would ever see that money again. Medicare usually came through, but sometimes things went wrong, sometimes paperwork got lost, sometimes there were complications. But she also knew she would not have been able to sleep tonight if she had walked away. She would have lain in her bed listening to the rain, thinking about Mr. Hartman, going home without the medication he needed, wondering if she would see him again in the emergency room in 2 weeks, worse than before. Some decisions were not about logic or financial planning. They were about being able to live with yourself. She carried the medication back inside, took the elevator to the 3rd floor, and found Karen still at the nursing station. "Patient-supplied medication," Maya said, handing over the bag, with the documentation and receipt. "I will need you to witness and sign off on the intake." Karen took the papers and read through them carefully, then signed where required. She looked at Maya for a long moment before speaking. "You know what you just did? You gave this man a real chance. The research on these newer cardiac medications is clear. This could add years to his life." "I just paid for a prescription," Maya said. "No," Karen said firmly. "You saw a human being who needed help and you helped him. That is not small, Maya. That is everything." The next morning, Maya returned for her final shift before her days off. She found Mr. Hartman, already showing subtle improvement. His color was better. His breathing was easier. When she checked on him, he was sitting up in bed reading a worn paperback novel. "How are you feeling, Mr. Hartman?" she asked. "Much better, dear. Much better." He smiled at her, that same gentle apologetic smile. "They told me the medication situation was worked out. Some kind of temporary assistance program came through. I am very grateful." Maya nodded, saying nothing. She had asked Karen to frame it that way. Mr. Hartman did not need to know the truth. He did not need to feel indebted or uncomfortable. He just needed to get well. "I am glad it worked out," Maya said simply. "Keep taking your medications exactly as prescribed, and I think you will be going home soon." "Thank you, dear. You have been so kind to me. All of you have." His eyes grew a bit misty. "I know nurses work so hard. I see it. My late wife was a teacher, and she used to say that teachers and nurses share the same burden. You give everything to take care of others, and the world does not always give back to you." Maya felt her throat tighten. "Your wife sounds like she was a wise woman." She was. "I wish you could have met her." After she finished her rounds, Maya allowed herself a small moment of satisfaction. Mr. Hartman was improving. The medication was working. Dr. Patel had been pleased with his progress and confirmed the discharge for tomorrow. That was what mattered. The financial stress would sort itself out somehow. It always did. Maybe not easily, maybe not comfortably, but it would sort out. The Medicare reimbursement would come through eventually. Her paycheck would arrive in 5 days. She would juggle accounts, eat pasta and rice for 2 weeks, skip her morning coffee from the cafe. She had done it before. She would do it again. She had 3 days off starting tomorrow. 3 days to sleep, to rest, to let her body recover from 7 straight days of 11-hour shifts. 3 days to not think about impossible choices and broken systems and the crushing weight of trying to care for people in a world that made caring so difficult. But for now, in this moment, Mr. Hartman was breathing easier. His heart was working more efficiently. He would go home tomorrow, with a real chance at staying out of the hospital, and that had to be enough. Maya's 3 days off passed in a strange suspended stillness. The rain continued, sometimes heavy, sometimes light, but always present. She slept more than she had in months, waking at odd hours disoriented and heavy-limbed, her body finally surrendering to the exhaustion it had been holding at bay. On the second day, she forced herself to deal with practical matters. She sat at her tiny kitchen table with her laptop open, looking at her bank accounts, checking $843, savings $212, credit card available, $22.20, Her paycheck would deposit in 3 days, $912 after taxes. Rent was due in 5 days, $450. That would leave $462. Car insurance would auto-pay in 7 days, $350. That would leave $112 for 2 weeks of groceries, gas, and anything unexpected. Maya ran the numbers 3 times, trying to find a different outcome. There was not one. She transferred $60 from savings to checking, leaving her with $152 in savings. The transfer felt like moving water from one side of a sinking boat to the other. It did not actually help, but it created the illusion of action. With the $60 transfer, after rent she would have $522, after car insurance, $172. For 2 weeks, it was doable, barely. She would buy rice, beans, pasta, canned vegetables, whatever was on sale. She would not eat out, not even once. She would meal prep everything. She had done it before, she could do it again. Maya opened her student loan account next, $48,217. The number barely changed month to month because she could only afford the minimum payment of $153, which mostly covered interest. At her current rate, she would be paying this debt for 22 more years. She would be 51 years old when she finally paid it off, assuming nothing else went wrong. Assuming she never had a medical emergency, never needed a new car, never faced any of the 1,000 small disasters that could derail everything. Maya closed her laptop and stared out the window at the rain. She thought about nursing school, about how idealistic she had been, how certain that she was choosing a noble profession, a secure career, a way to make a real difference in the world. The guidance counselor had shown her statistics about nursing salaries and job security. What they had not shown her were statistics about student loan debt, about nurse-to-patient ratios, about burnout rates and compassion fatigue. Nobody had told her about the crushing weight of caring deeply in a system that cared so little, about making $43 an hour, while being unable to afford basic financial stability, about the moral exhaustion of watching people suffer because they could not afford care, while you yourself could barely afford to care for them. Her phone buzzed, a text from Jennifer, her coworker. Mr. Hartman went home today, doing great. You really helped that man, Maya. Maya stared at the message for a long time. She knew Jennifer meant well, but the words felt complicated. Yes, the medication had helped. Yes, Mr. Hartman was going home. But what about all the other Mr. Hartmans? What about next month, next year? The endless parade of people caught between sickness and poverty. One act of kindness did not fix a broken system. It just made the brokenness slightly more bearable for one person, one time, and it had cost her $164.80 that she absolutely could not afford, with only a tentative promise of eventual reimbursement. She typed back, "Glad he is doing well." On her 3rd day off, Maya walked to the small grocery store 6 blocks from her apartment. The rain had finally stopped, but the sky remained gray and heavy. She bought rice, pasta, canned tomatoes, dried beans, a loaf of bread, peanut butter oatmeal, and the cheapest coffee available. Total $37.12. Walking back, carrying 2 canvas bags full of groceries that would need to last 2 weeks, she passed a coffee shop where a group of young people sat by the window, laughing and talking, expensive drinks in front of them. Through the window she could see pastries in a glass case, beautiful and golden and completely out of reach. She felt a sharp pang of something that was not quite envy, not quite resentment, more like grief for a version of life that felt impossibly distant. A life where you could buy a $5 coffee without calculating whether it meant skipping lunch. A life where an unexpected expense did not trigger a cascade of financial panic. That night, she lay in bed listening to the sound of her neighbors through the thin walls, a television playing, a couple arguing, a baby crying, the sounds of other people's lives, other people's struggles. She thought about Mr. Hartman in his hospital bed, wearing his faded cardigan, apologizing for being trouble. She thought about his wife, Evelyn, the 2nd grade teacher, about 46 years of marriage, about what it meant to be loved like that, to love like that. Maya did not regret helping him. Even now, lying in the dark, calculating how many meals she could stretch from $7 worth of pasta and canned tomatoes, she did not regret it. But she also could not shake the feeling that she was slowly drowning, and every act of kindness was another weight pulling her down. How many more times could she do this? How many more patients could she help before she finally went under herself? Eventually she slept, and when she woke the next morning, it was time to go back to work. Maya had been back at work for 4 days when Karen approached her at the nursing station with an unusual expression on her face. "There is someone here to see you," Karen said quietly. "In the family consultation room." "Who?" He said. "His name is Daniel Whitmore. He is a lawyer." Maya felt her stomach drop. A lawyer? Why would a lawyer want to see her? Had she done something wrong? Was there some legal issue with helping Mr. Hartman? Had Medicare denied the claim, and now there was some kind of investigation? "Did he say what it is about?" Maya asked, hearing the tremor in her own voice. "No, but he was very polite, very professional. He said he just needs a few minutes of your time." Karen put a hand on her arm. "Hey, breathe. I do not think you are in trouble." He did not have that energy. Maya glanced at the clock. She was due for her break anyway. "Okay, let me finish charting this, and I will be right there." Her hands shook slightly as she completed her notes. She ran through every possible scenario in her head. Maybe the Medicare authorization had been denied and there was some complication. Maybe there was some regulation she had unknowingly violated by purchasing medication on behalf of a patient. Maybe Mr. Hartman had been readmitted and his family was upset about something. She had never met Mr. Hartman's family. He had never mentioned having any. Maya took a deep breath, smoothed down her scrubs, and walked to the family consultation room. It was a small bland space with a table, 4 chairs, and a box of tissues that got used far too often for difficult conversations. The man sitting at the table stood when she entered. He was probably in his mid-50s with graying hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. He wore a well-tailored suit and carried a leather briefcase. Everything about him suggested competence and expense. The kind of lawyer who billed $400 an hour. "Miss Reynolds, I am Daniel Whitmore." He extended his hand and Maya shook it, his grip firm and professional. "Thank you for taking the time to meet with me. I know you are very busy." "Of course." Maya sat down across from him, trying to keep her expression neutral. "What is this about?" "First, let me assure you that you are not in any trouble," Daniel said, as if reading her mind. "In fact, quite the opposite. I am here on behalf of Samuel Hartman." "Is he all right?" Maya felt a spike of worry. "Did something happen?" "He is doing very well actually. Better than he has in months. I understand he was discharged 6 days ago and is recovering nicely at home." Daniel opened his briefcase and removed a folder. "Mr. Hartman asked me to speak with you on his behalf regarding a personal matter." Maya felt confused. "I do not understand." "Miss Reynolds, are you the person who paid for Mr. Hartman's cardiac medication out of your own funds?" There it was. The question she had been dreading. Maya hesitated, unsure how to answer. Was this some kind of investigation? Was there a problem with the Medicare claim? "It is all right," Daniel said gently, seeming to sense her fear. "You are not being accused of anything inappropriate. There is no investigation. Mr. Hartman simply wants to know if you are the one who helped him." Maya nodded slowly. "Yes, but I asked the hospital staff to tell him it was an assistance program. I did not want him to feel uncomfortable or indebted. He figured it out," Daniel said, a slight smile crossing his face. "Mr. Hartman is sharper than people give him credit for. He asked questions at the pharmacy when he went to pick up his refill. He made some phone calls. He put the pieces together. When he realized what you had done, he was quite determined to find a way to thank you properly." "That is not necessary. The Medicare reimbursement will come through, and that is all I need." Maya paused. "It will come through, right? Is that why you are here? Is there a problem with the claim?" "No problem at all. The prior authorization was approved yesterday. The reimbursement check should be mailed to you within 7 to 10 business days." Daniel reached into his briefcase again. "But that is not why I am here." He pulled out a thick envelope and placed it on the table between them. Maya stared at it. "What is that?" "A letter from Mr. Hartman, and something else." Daniel slid the envelope across the table. "He asked me to make sure you received this personally. Everything inside is legally documented and above board. There are no strings attached, no expectations, no conditions. He simply wants you to have this as a token of his profound gratitude." Maya picked up the envelope with trembling hands. It was heavy. Through the paper she could feel something stiff inside. "I should let you open that in private," Daniel said, standing. "But before I go, I want to tell you something. I have been Mr. Hartman's attorney for 15 years. I have handled his business affairs, his estate planning, everything. In all that time I have never seen him do anything quite like this. You clearly made quite an impression on him. I just helped with medication. Maya said, her voice barely above a whisper. You did more than that. You treated him with dignity when the system treated him like a number. You sacrificed something you could not afford to sacrifice because you saw him as a human being who needed help. Daniel picked up his briefcase. That matters more than you know. If you have any questions after you read the letter, my contact information is inside. But I suspect everything will be clear. He left quietly, closing the door behind him. Maya sat alone in the consultation room, holding the envelope, afraid to open it. Her heart was pounding. Her mind was racing with possibilities, none of them making sense. What could Mr. Hartman possibly have sent? A thank you card. Maybe a small gift card to help offset the cost of the medication. Finally, she carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter on cream-colored stationery, the handwriting shaky but legible. And beneath the letter, a check. Maya looked at the check first, and her breath stopped entirely. $75,000. Maya stared at the check for a long time, certain she was misreading it. She blinked hard, looked away, then looked back. But no matter how many times she looked, the number remained the same. $75,000. Made out to her name. Signed by Samuel Hartman in that same shaky handwriting. With trembling hands, she set the check down and picked up the letter. Dear Maya, please forgive the shakiness of my handwriting. My hands are not what they used to be, but I wanted to write this myself, not have someone else type it for me. What I have to say feels too important to delegate. By now, you have seen the check. You are probably shocked. Maybe you think there has been some mistake. I assure you there has not. Every dollar is meant for you, and I hope you will accept it without guilt or hesitation. Let me tell you a story. I have not told many people this story, but I think you deserve to know it. I grew up in Ohio during the Great Depression. We were poor in a way that is hard to explain to people who have never known true poverty. My father was a factory worker who lost his job in 1932, when I was just 2 years old. My mother took in laundry and mending to keep food on the table. We lived in a 2-room apartment with my grandmother, and in winter we all slept together in the kitchen because it was the only room we could afford to heat. When I was 12 years old, in the winter of 1942, I got sick. To pneumonia. Back then, before antibiotics were widely available, pneumonia killed children regularly. My parents had no money for a doctor. They wrapped me in blankets and hoped I would survive. A nurse named Margaret O'Connor heard about me through our church. She came to our apartment on her day off. She examined me, stayed with me through 2 days of fever, and somehow convinced a doctor she knew to provide penicillin that we could never have afforded. She saved my life. I never forgot her. When I grew up and started my business, I thought about her every single day. I thought about how one person's kindness had changed the entire trajectory of my life. Without her, I would have died at 12 years old. Everything I became, everything I accomplished, everything I experienced, it all existed because she cared enough to help a poor child she did not know. I became successful, Maya. More successful than I ever imagined possible. I started a company called Hartman Biomedical Systems in 1968. We manufactured diagnostic equipment for hospitals. It was not glamorous work, but it was good work, important work. By the time I sold the company in 2003, it was worth a great deal of money. Evelyn and I never had children. We lived simply because that was what felt right to us. We did not need a mansion or fancy cars. We had each other, and that was enough. When she got sick 6 years ago, I learned firsthand what the healthcare system had become. The complexity, the bureaucracy, the way patients are reduced to account numbers and insurance codes. Evelyn had excellent insurance. We had resources, and still, navigating her care was exhausting and dehumanizing. I kept thinking about all the people who did not have what we had. People like the boy I had once been, lying in a kitchen wrapped in blankets, unable to afford medicine. After Evelyn died, I made a decision. I would live the rest of my life paying attention, really paying attention, to people, to systems, to the small moments where kindness either appears or does not. When I was admitted to the hospital, I watched you. I watched all the nurses, but especially you. I saw how tired you were. How you still smiled anyway. How you apologized to me for taking an extra 30 seconds to adjust my IV when I should have been apologizing to you for the impossible job you were doing. I saw you trying to solve the medication problem, making calls, checking programs. Your face when you realized there were no good options. The way you quietly slipped away to talk to your supervisor. I did not know what you would do, but I hoped, and when I figured out what you had done, I was not surprised. I was just grateful that people like you still exist. People who see other human beings, and not just problems to be managed. People who sacrifice what they cannot afford to sacrifice because their conscience will not let them walk away. My lawyer tells me you have significant student loan debt, approximately $48,000. This check will pay off that debt completely and leave you with enough to build a proper emergency fund. Maybe even enough to take a real vacation, something I suspect you have not had in a very long time. This money is not charity, Maya. It is recognition, it is gratitude. It is one old man saying thank you to one exhausted nurse who still found room in her life to help a stranger pay off every penny of those loans. All of them. Feel what it is like to not carry that weight anymore. Then take what remains and give yourself the breathing room you deserve. Take a real vacation. Build a savings account. Buy yourself some time to remember why you became a nurse in the first place. The world needs you, but it needs you whole, not broken into pieces by a system that takes everything and gives back so little. I am doing fine, by the way. The medication is working wonderfully. I feel better than I have in 2 years. My doctor said this medication has probably added several years to my life. I am living proof that your kindness had real tangible consequences, important consequences. Thank you, Maya. Thank you for seeing me as a human being and not just a patient. Thank you for sacrificing something you could not afford to sacrifice. Thank you for being the kind of person Margaret O'Connor was for me all those years ago. With deepest gratitude and respect, Samuel Hartman P.S. I hope you do not mind that I researched your situation. Daniel is very thorough. I wanted to make sure this gift would truly make a difference, not just be a token gesture. If there is one thing I learned in business, it is that you should always understand the problem fully before trying to solve it. Maya read the letter 3 times. Then she set it down carefully on the table and put her face in her hands. She did not cry immediately. She was too stunned to cry. Her mind could not process what had just happened. 1 week ago she had been lying in bed, calculating whether she could afford to buy fresh vegetables. She had been moving $60 from savings to checking like it mattered. She had been staring at a student loan balance that would follow her for 2 more decades. Now she was holding a check that would eliminate all of that. Just like that. In one moment, everything had changed. It did not feel real. The enormity of it hit her in waves. $48,000 of debt, gone. 22 more years of monthly payments, gone. The constant background anxiety about money, the endless calculations, the shame of being nearly 30 years old and still living like a college student, all of it, gone. And more than that, after paying off the loans, there would be nearly $27,000 left. An amount of money she had never had in her life. An emergency fund, a safety net. The ability to handle an unexpected car repair without panic. The ability to go to the dentist, to buy groceries without counting every dollar. To maybe possibly think about moving to an apartment without mildew in the walls. There was a soft knock on the door. Karen poked her head in. "Everything okay?" she asked. "You have been in here for almost half an hour." Maya looked up at her supervisor, and Karen must have seen something in her expression because she quickly stepped inside and closed the door. "What happened?" Karen asked, sitting down beside her. Maya handed her the letter wordlessly. Karen read it, her eyes widening, and then Maya showed her the check. "Oh my God," Karen whispered. "Maya, oh my God, is this real?" Maya asked, her voice sounding strange and distant to her own ears. "Can this actually be real?" Karen looked at the check again, studying it carefully. "It looks completely legitimate. And if Daniel Whitmore is involved, it is definitely legitimate. He is one of the most respected estate attorneys in the state. He does not do anything that is not absolutely by the book." She set the check down and took Maya's hand. "This is real. This is really happening." Maya felt something breaking loose inside her chest. Not panic exactly. More like a dam finally giving way after years of pressure. She started to cry, and once she started she could not stop. Great gasping sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep and ancient, a place where all her fear and exhaustion and bone-deep weariness had been stored. Karen held her, saying nothing, just being present while Maya released years of accumulated stress and struggle. When Maya finally caught her breath, Karen handed her tissues from the box on the table. "I do not deserve this," Maya said through her tears. "I just paid for medication, that is all I did. It was not even that much money." "Stop," Karen said firmly. "Stop that right now. You spent money you absolutely could not afford to help someone you barely knew. You did it without expectation of reward. You did it because it was right, even though it put you at risk. That is exactly the kind of thing that deserves recognition. But $75,000 is probably less than what Mr. Hartman spends on property taxes every year." Karen interrupted. "Maya, listen to me. This man is wealthy, very wealthy. This gift does not hurt him. It helps you tremendously, but it does not cost him anything he will miss." She squeezed Maya's hand. "Let yourself accept this. Let yourself believe you are worthy of this kind of generosity." Maya wiped her eyes and looked at the check again. $75,000, written out in words and numbers, made real by ink and signature and intention. "What do I do now?" she asked. "You deposit it," Karen said. "You go to your bank, you deposit it, you wait for it to clear, and then you pay off every single penny of those student loans. And then you take yourself out to a nice dinner and you celebrate. I have 3 more hours left in my shift. Go home, Maya. I will cover your patients. You are in no state to work right now. Are you sure?" "Absolutely sure. Go to your bank before it closes. Start handling this." "And Maya," Karen smiled, "congratulations. You deserve every bit of this." Maya drove to her bank in a daze, the envelope with the check and letter sitting on her passenger seat like some kind of impossible artifact. The rain had started again, light and steady, but for the first time in weeks, it did not make her feel trapped and hopeless. It just sounded like rain. The bank was quiet on a Thursday afternoon. Maya waited in line behind an elderly man depositing coins and a young couple opening a joint account. When her turn came, she approached the teller, a woman named Stacy who had processed her modest paychecks many times before. "Hi Maya," Stacy said pleasantly. "How can I help you today?" Maya slid the check across the counter. "I need to deposit this." Stacy picked up the check and her eyes widened immediately. "Oh, let me. I need to get my manager for this." The manager, a serious man in his 40s named Robert, came over quickly. He looked at the check, then at Maya, then back at the check. "Miss Reynolds, this is a substantial amount. Can you tell me about the source of these funds?" Maya had anticipated this. "It is a gift from a former patient. Everything is documented. His attorney handled it." She pulled out Daniel Whitmore's business card. "You can call him if you need verification." Robert studied the card, then looked at the check again. "I am going to need to ask you a few more questions. This is standard procedure for deposits over $10,000. It is not personal, just federal banking regulations." He led her to a small office and asked her questions about Mr. Hartman, about the circumstances of the gift, about whether this was part of any kind of business transaction or settlement. Maya answered honestly, explaining about the medication, about helping a patient in need, about Mr. Hartman's gratitude. Robert took notes, made a copy of Daniel Whitmore's card, and finally nodded. "Everything appears to be in order. This will take approximately 3 to 5 business days to clear, given the amount. Once it clears, the funds will be available in your account, and then I can use them to pay off loans." "Absolutely. Once the funds are fully cleared and available, they are yours to use however you choose." He actually smiled. "Congratulations, Miss Reynolds, this is quite a gift." When Maya left the bank, she sat in her car for a long time, watching the rain stream down the windshield. She kept expecting to wake up, for this to be some kind of stress dream brought on by too many double shifts and too much financial anxiety. But it was not a dream. The deposit receipt in her hand was real, the check was real. In 3 to 5 business days, $75,000 would be in her account. She called her mother. "Hey honey," her mother answered. "Everything all right? You do not usually call during the day." "Mom, something happened." Maya's voice cracked. "Something incredible happened." "What is it? Are you okay?" "I am more than okay, Mom. A patient I took care of, the one I told you about who needed medication, he gave me a gift." She took a shaky breath. "Mom, he gave me $75,000. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Mom, are you there?" "I am here." Her mother's voice was tight with emotion. "Sweetheart, did you say $75,000? "Yes, he wrote me a letter explaining everything. He wanted me to pay off my student loans and have some left over for savings. Mom, I am going to be debt-free." Her mother started crying. Maya could hear her father in the background asking what was wrong. "Nothing is wrong," her mother said through tears. "Everything is right, Tom. Our daughter, someone gave her $75,000. She can pay off her loans." Maya heard her father's exclamation of disbelief, heard him taking the phone. "Maya, is this for real? This is not some kind of scam." "It is real, Dad. I just deposited the check at the bank. His lawyer handled everything. It is legitimate." Her father, who almost never cried, started crying too. "Oh sweetheart, oh thank God, we have been so worried about you, so worried about those loans, about you working yourself to death." They talked for 40 minutes, Maya sitting in her parked car in the bank parking lot, rain falling steadily, telling her parents the whole story. About Mr. Hartman and his late wife Evelyn, about the medication, about the letter, and Margaret O'Connor, and the chain of kindness stretching across decades. When she finally hung up, Maya felt lighter than she had in years, as if some fundamental weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She drove home slowly, not wanting to rush this feeling. When she got to her apartment, she made tea and sat at her kitchen table with her laptop open. Student loan account, $48,217. She stared at the number. In 3 to 5 days, she would be able to make it disappear. Just like that, one payment, and the debt that had shadowed every decision for the past 7 years would simply cease to exist. Maya imagined what that would feel like. Waking up without that weight, making decisions without having to calculate whether she could afford them. Being able to say yes to things, small things, like coffee with friends or a new pair of shoes, without feeling guilty or reckless. She imagined having an emergency fund. If her car broke down, she could just fix it. If she got sick and missed work, she would be okay. If she wanted to take a vacation, an actual vacation, she could do it. The enormity of it overwhelmed her. She closed her laptop and sat in the quiet of her small apartment, listening to the rain, feeling the shift happening inside her. This was not just about money, it was about dignity, about security, about being able to breathe without the constant pressure of financial panic. It was about being seen. Mr. Hartman had seen her exhaustion, her sacrifice, her humanity. He had seen her in a way the system never did, and he had decided that her kindness was worth something. That she was worth something. Maya thought about Margaret O'Connor, the nurse who had saved a 12-year-old boy's life in 1942. She wondered if Margaret had any idea what she had set in motion, how that one act of kindness had created a man who went on to build a successful company, who went on to help others, who went on to change Maya's life 83 years later. Kindness was not small, it echoed, it rippled, it created possibilities that could not be predicted or measured. Over the next 3 days, Maya went through her shifts in a kind of heightened awareness. She noticed things she usually missed. The way the elderly woman in room 312 laughed at her grandson's jokes. The quiet competence of the respiratory therapist helping a patient breathe easier. The moment when a family received good news about their mother's test results. All the small miracles that happened in hospitals every day, usually unnoticed because everyone was too tired and too busy to stop and see them. On the 4th day, Maya checked her bank account and saw that the check had cleared. The money was there, actually there. Available balance, $75,843. She sat staring at her phone screen for 5 full minutes. Then she logged into her student loan account and navigated to the payment screen. She entered the full balance, $48,217. She reviewed the payment 3 times before clicking submit. When the confirmation screen appeared, Maya read it slowly. Payment received. Your loan balance is now $0. She closed her eyes and let the relief wash over her. 0. After 7 years of monthly payments, after 7 years of watching the balance barely budge, after 7 years of calculating and recalculating and hoping someday it would end, it was over. She opened her banking app again. After the loan payment, She had $27,626. More money than she had ever had in her life. Maya transferred $10,000 to her savings account, an emergency fund, a real one, enough to cover 3 months of expenses if something went wrong. She looked at the remaining balance, $17,626. She could afford to move to a better apartment, she could buy a plane ticket to visit her parents, she could get her car serviced properly, she could buy groceries without calculating every purchase, she could go to the dentist for the first time in 3 years, she could breathe. That evening, Maya did something she had not done in 5 years. She went to a nice restaurant by herself, not fast food, not takeout, a real restaurant with tablecloths and menus printed on heavy paper. She ordered wine. She ordered an appetizer. She ordered the salmon without checking the price first. When the food came, she ate slowly, savoring every bite, feeling the strangeness of not having to rush, not having to worry, not having to calculate. The server brought the check, $63 with tip. A month ago, that amount would have caused her genuine anxiety. Now she handed over her card without hesitation. Walking back to her car, Maya looked up at the evening sky. The rain had stopped. Stars were visible between the clouds. She thought about Mr. Hartman, in his modest house, wearing his faded cardigan, reading his worn paperback novels. She thought about how he had spent his life paying attention, looking for opportunities to pass on the kindness that had once saved his life. She wanted to thank him properly, not just with words, but with something meaningful. Maya pulled out her phone and texted Daniel Whitmore. Is it possible to meet with Mr. Hartman in person? I would like to thank him properly. The response came quickly. He was hoping you would ask. He suggested next week, Tuesday at 2 p.m., at his home if that works for you. Maya typed back, that would be perfect. Thank you. She drove home slowly, windows down, cold evening air streaming through the car. For the first time in as long as she could remember, the future felt like something other than a series of obstacles to survive. It felt like possibility. The following Tuesday, Maya drove to Mr. Hartman's address in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of town. The houses here were modest but well maintained, with mature trees and small gardens showing the care of longtime residents. Mr. Hartman's house was a single-story ranch painted pale blue, with a neat lawn and flower beds that showed signs of recent attention despite the winter season. She parked on the street and sat for a moment, gathering her thoughts. She had rehearsed what she wanted to say, but now it all felt inadequate. How did you thank someone for changing your entire life? She walked up the path and knocked on the door. Miss Hartman opened it himself, and Maya was struck by how different he looked. In the hospital he had seemed frail, diminished by illness and institutional fluorescent lighting. Now standing in the doorway of his own home, he looked solid, present. His color was good, his eyes were clear. He wore the same faded cardigan she remembered, but now it seemed like a choice, rather than a necessity. Maya, he said, smiling warmly. Please come in, I am so glad you came. The inside of the house was simple and clean. Hardwood floors that showed their age but had been carefully maintained. Comfortable furniture that was old but well cared for. Books everywhere, on shelves, stacked on tables, piled beside chairs. History, science, literature, philosophy. But what drew Maya's attention most were the photographs. They were everywhere, covering the walls, arranged on every surface. Most featured a woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile, Evelyn. There were wedding photos from what looked like the late 1960s, travel photos from various decades, candid shots of ordinary moments made precious by time. In every picture, Mr. Hartman and Evelyn looked at each other with a tenderness that made Maya's throat tight. Those are lovely, Maya said softly. 46 years, Mr. Hartman said, following her gaze. Every one of them a gift. Please sit. Can I get you tea, coffee? Tea would be lovely, thank you. He disappeared into the kitchen, moving with a steadiness that confirmed what Daniel had said. The medication was working remarkably well. Maya took the opportunity to look around more. There was a piano in the corner, with sheet music open on the stand. More books, a framed newspaper clipping from 2003, about the sale of Hartman Biomedical Systems. A worn Afghan draped over the couch, that looked handmade. Mr. Hartman returned with 2 cups of tea, and settled into a chair across from her, moving with the careful deliberation of someone who had learned to respect his body's limitations. "Thank you for the tea, and thank you for..." Maya paused, overwhelmed. "Mr. Hartman, I do not even know how to begin to thank you for what you did. You changed my life, completely changed it." "Please call me Samuel, and you are very welcome, but you do not need to thank me. You gave me something precious, and I simply returned the favor." He sipped his tea. "How are you feeling? Is everything settling for you?" "I paid off my student loans," Maya said, still marveling at being able to say those words. "All of them, and I have an emergency fund for the first time in my adult life. I took myself out to a nice dinner. I scheduled a dentist appointment." These sound like small things, but they feel enormous. "They are not small things," Samuel said firmly. "Financial stability is not small. Peace of mind is not small. The ability to make choices without constant fear is not small." He paused. "I remember what it was like to be poor, Maya. Really poor. It is exhausting in a way that people who have never experienced it cannot understand. It takes up all your mental space. It makes everything harder." "Yes," Maya breathed. "That is exactly what it is like." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, sipping tea. "I wanted to meet with you for another reason as well," Samuel said eventually. "I have been thinking a great deal since I came home from the hospital, about what I observed there, about the broken systems, about the way patients are trapped between what they need and what they can afford." Maya nodded. This was familiar territory. "And I have been thinking about nurses," Samuel continued. "About the impossible position you are all in. You are asked to care deeply, but the system makes it nearly impossible to do so without destroying yourselves in the process." "That is a good description," Maya said quietly. "I want to do something about it, not on a systemic policy level. I am not naive enough to think I can fix healthcare, but on a practical local level." He leaned forward slightly. "I want to create a charitable fund, something that can help patients at Pacific Shore who fall through the cracks. People like me facing medication costs they cannot afford while waiting for insurance approvals. People who have to choose between medicine and food." Maya felt a surge of emotion. "Samuel, that would be incredible. I am prepared to fund it substantially, enough to help many patients every year. I have been meeting with Daniel to structure it properly, and I want to call it the Evelyn Hartman Care Fund." His voice softened. "After my wife, she would have loved this idea. She spent her whole life helping children. This feels like a continuation of her work." "That is beautiful," Maya said, tears pricking her eyes. "But here is what I need," Samuel continued. "I need someone who understands the front lines. Someone who knows which patients are falling through the cracks and why. Someone the medical staff trusts to make good decisions about allocating resources." He looked at her directly. "I would like you to be involved, Maya. Not as a full-time job. I know you love nursing and I would never ask you to give that up. But as a consultant, someone who helps identify where the fund can do the most good. Someone who bridges the gap between the resources and the need." Maya sat back stunned. "Samuel, I do not know anything about running a charitable fund." "You know the most important thing," he said gently. "You know the patients, you know what the real problems are, not what they look like on paper. The rest, the legal structure, the accounting, the paperwork, Daniel and I can handle all of that." He smiled. "I am not asking you to run it. I am asking you to be a voice, to help ensure the money goes where it is actually needed, not just where it looks good in a report." Maya thought about all the patients she had seen over the years. Mrs. Garcia, the diabetic woman who had been rationing her insulin for 3 months. Mr. Wilson, who had been hospitalized twice because he could not afford his blood pressure medication. The young mother whose baby needed specialized formula that insurance would not cover. The elderly man who had been cutting his heart pills in half to make them last longer. So many people, so many impossible choices. "If I did this," she said slowly, "I would want real input. Not just token involvement. I would want my recommendations to actually matter." "Absolutely," Samuel said. "I am not interested in running this alone and making all the decisions. I know what the problems look like from the outside. You know what they look like from the inside. We need both perspectives, and it would not interfere with my nursing. I cannot compromise patient care. Of course not. We would work entirely around your schedule. Most of it could be done via email or short monthly meetings, maybe 4 to 5 hours per month total, and you would be compensated for your time, naturally." Maya started to protest, but Samuel held up a hand. "This would be real work, Maya. you would be providing valuable expertise. It is appropriate for you to be paid for that. He named an hourly rate that made Maya's eyes widen. Does that seem fair? That is more than fair. That is generous. Good, then we have an agreement. Maya looked at him, this kind old man in his faded cardigan, surrounded by photographs of the wife he still loved, determined to use his resources to help people he would never meet. She saw in him something rare, someone who had succeeded in life but had not forgotten what struggle felt like. Someone who understood that wealth created responsibility. Yes, she said, I will do it. I would be honored to do it. Samuel's face lit up with genuine joy. Thank you, Maya. This means more than you know. They spent the next hour discussing practicalities. Samuel explained that he was establishing the fund with an initial endowment of $500,000. The fund would operate using only the investment income, preserving the principal so it could continue indefinitely. I have been consulting with financial advisors, Samuel explained. With careful management, we should be able to help 40 to 60 patients per year without ever touching the principal. More if the investments perform well. He showed her a draft of the criteria for assistance. Patients who needed help with medication costs during insurance approval delays. Patients who needed durable medical equipment they could not afford. Patients facing urgent medical needs with no way to pay. I want this to be practical, Samuel said, not bureaucratic. When someone needs help, they should be able to get help quickly, not fill out 20 forms and wait 6 weeks. That is exactly what is needed, Maya agreed. So many programs exist on paper but are impossible to actually access. They talked about process, about how nurses and social workers could submit requests, about how to verify need without making patients feel degraded. Samuel had thought through many of these details already, but he listened carefully to Maya's input, making notes, adjusting his thinking. As the afternoon lengthened, Maya felt something shifting inside her. This was purpose. This was meaning. For years she had felt like she was trying to bail water out of a sinking boat with a teaspoon. Now, suddenly she had tools, resources, the ability to actually solve problems instead of just witnessing them. There is one more thing I want to discuss, Samuel said as Maya prepared to leave. The fund helps patients, but I have been thinking about the caregivers too. The nurses and staff who are burning out because the system demands so much and gives back so little. Maya looked at him curiously. What do you mean? I mean creating a separate smaller fund to provide support for healthcare workers at Pacific Shore. Small grants for things that matter. A real vacation, therapy sessions, help with childcare during difficult shifts. Whatever would genuinely help people survive in this profession without destroying themselves. That would be complicated, Maya said thoughtfully. How would we choose? How would we avoid it seeming like favoritism? Those are good questions. I do not have all the answers yet, but I think it is worth exploring. He looked at her seriously. People cannot pour from an empty cup. If we want patients to receive good care, we need to take care of the people providing that care. Maya felt tears building again. Samuel, that is one of the kindest ideas I have ever heard. It comes from watching you, he said simply. Watching you push yourself past exhaustion because the patients needed you. That is not sustainable, Maya, for you or for anyone. If we can help even a few nurses get the rest and support they need, we should. As Maya drove home that evening, she felt different than she had in years. Not just hopeful but purposeful. She was not just surviving anymore. She was building something, contributing to something that would outlast her, that would help people she would never meet. When she got home, she sat at her kitchen table and wrote an email to Samuel and Daniel, outlining her initial thoughts on how to implement the fund, who to work with at the hospital, what the process might look like. It was nearly midnight when she finally stopped writing. For the first time in years, Maya went to bed excited about the future, not dreading it, not just trying to survive it, but genuinely looking forward to what might come next. 3 months later, spring was beginning to soften the California coast. The rain had finally given way to occasional sunshine. Flowers were blooming in gardens. The air smelled like possibility instead of damp cold. Maya stood in the conference room at Pacific Shore Regional Medical Center, looking at the gathered group. Karen was there, along with Patricia, the social worker, Dr. Patel, and 3 other nurses from different units. Samuel and Daniel sat at the far end of the table, Samuel looking comfortable and engaged despite being the only non-medical professional in the room. Let me start with the results, Maya said, pulling up the presentation she had prepared. In the first 3 months, the Evelyn Hartman Care Fund has provided assistance to 27 patients. She clicked to the next slide, showing a breakdown. 15 patients received help with prescription medications during insurance approval delays. 6 received assistance with durable medical equipment, wheelchairs, oxygen concentrators, hospital beds for home use. 4 received help with specialized nutritional needs not covered by insurance. 2 received assistance with urgent dental procedures that were affecting their overall health. Dr. Patel raised his hand. What was the average assistance amount? It varied widely. The lowest was $84 for a week of diabetes medication. The highest was $1,400 for a power wheelchair. Average was about $470 per patient. Maya clicked to the next slide. More importantly, we have tracked outcomes. Of the 27 patients we helped, 26 have not been readmitted. The one readmission was unrelated to the issue we addressed. In the same 3-month period last year, patients with similar profiles had a readmission rate of 41%. The room was quiet as everyone absorbed this. That is remarkable, Dr. Patel said finally. Those are better outcomes than some much more expensive interventions. The fund is working exactly as we hoped, Samuel said from his end of the table. We are catching people before they fall through the cracks, before they end up sicker and back in the hospital. Karen spoke up. The nursing staff loves this program. For the first time, we have a way to actually solve problems instead of just documenting them. The morale impact has been significant. They spent the next hour discussing logistics, reviewing specific cases, talking about how to streamline the application process even further. Samuel listened more than he spoke, but when he did contribute, his questions were sharp and insightful. As the meeting was wrapping up, Daniel cleared his throat. There is one more item to discuss. Samuel has decided to expand the fund's scope. Everyone looked at Samuel, who smiled slightly. I have been thinking about sustainability, not just of the fund, but of the people who make healthcare work. Maya and I have discussed creating a separate wellness fund for healthcare workers at Pacific Shore. He explained the concept. Small grants to help nurses and staff get the support they needed. Therapy sessions, child care assistance, respite care for those caring for sick family members, even just a paid week off to rest and recover from burnout. I am committing an additional $200,000 to establish this, Samuel said. It will be administered separately from the Patient Assistance Fund, with its own criteria and process. I would like Maya to help develop those criteria, working with staff to understand what would actually be helpful. The nurses in the room looked stunned. One of them, a young man named Marcus who worked in the ICU, spoke up hesitantly. You would help us? The staff. Of course, Samuel said, looking genuinely confused by the question. You are the ones holding the system together. If we want good patient care, we need to take care of the caregivers. That seems obvious to me. After the meeting, as people filtered out, Samuel asked Maya to stay back for a moment. I wanted to tell you something, he said once they were alone. I have been getting letters. Letters from patients or their families, people we have helped. He pulled several envelopes from his briefcase. This one is from Rosa Martinez. We helped her with insulin costs. She wrote to thank me and included a picture of her grandchildren. She said she gets to watch them grow up now because of us. He showed Maya another letter. This is from the daughter of a man we helped get a hospital bed for home use. She said her father was able to die at home with dignity because of that bed. She sent a donation to the fund in his memory. Maya felt tears building. Samuel, that is beautiful. It is proof that what we are doing matters, not just in theory but in real, tangible ways. He looked at her seriously. None of this would exist without you, Maya. You were the catalyst. Your kindness to me set all of this in motion. I just paid for medication, Maya protested, but Samuel shook his head. No, you saw a human being who needed help, and you helped him, even though it cost you something you could not afford. That is courage, that is compassion, that is everything. He paused. Margaret O'Connor saved my life when I was 12, but she died young, and I never got to thank her properly. You have given me the chance to complete that circle, to pass on what she gave me. Maya understood then. This was not just about helping patients or supporting nurses. This was about Samuel healing something in himself, honoring a debt he had carried for 70 years. Thank you for letting me be part of this, she said softly. Thank you for making it possible. 2 weeks later, Maya did something she had not done in 6 years. She took a real vacation. She had found a small cabin on the coast, about 90 miles north. It was rustic and simple, with a wood-burning stove and windows that looked out over the Pacific. She had rented it for a full week, something that once would have been financially impossible but now felt almost casual. She drove up on a Saturday morning, the first truly clear day after months of rain. The highway wound along the coast, cliffs dropping away to the ocean, waves crashing white against dark rocks. Maya drove with the windows down, cold air streaming through the car, filling her lungs with salt and possibility. The cabin was perfect, one room with a sleeping loft, a small bathroom, a tiny kitchen. She brought groceries, real groceries, including fresh vegetables and good coffee and a bottle of wine. She brought books she had been meaning to read for years. She brought nothing else, no laptop, no agenda, no schedule, just time. She spent the first day sleeping, deeply dreamlessly, her body finally surrendering to rest without the background anxiety that usually accompanied sleep. When she woke it was late afternoon. She made coffee and sat on the small porch, watching the ocean. The second day she walked on the beach for hours, shoes off, feet in cold sand and colder water. She found shells and interesting rocks. She watched seabirds dive for fish. She sat on driftwood and did absolutely nothing. On the third day she thought about the past year, about how close she had come to giving up on nursing entirely. About the night she had stood in the rain outside the hospital crying from exhaustion, wondering if she could survive one more shift. That version of herself felt distant now. She was still tired sometimes. The work was still hard, but the constant crushing weight of financial panic was gone. The feeling of drowning had lifted. She thought about Mr. Hartman, Samuel in his blue house surrounded by photographs of Evelyn. She thought about Margaret O'Connor saving a sick child in 1942. She thought about the 27 patients the fund had helped, and the many more it would help in years to come. Kindness was not small. It echoed across time and space, creating ripples that spread further than anyone could predict. On the fifth day, Maya received a text from Karen. Just had to tell you, we used the fund to help a young mother whose baby needed specialized formula. She cried and asked who the angel was that helped her. I told her there were many angels, but the first one was a nurse who cared enough to help a stranger. Maya sat on the porch reading that message as the sun set over the Pacific, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. She thought about the young mother, about her baby, about how one moment of assistance might change the trajectory of that child's life. She thought about how she had almost not helped Samuel, how close she had come to making the practical self-protective choice. How different everything would be if she had walked away that day. That night, Maya built a fire in the wood stove and curled up with one of her books, but she found herself rereading the same page over and over, her mind elsewhere. She thought about going back to work next week, about seeing patients, about the new role she had helping to run the fund, about the wellness program for nurses that would launch next month. For the first time in years, she felt excited about work instead of dreading it. She felt like she had something to offer beyond just surviving shift by shift. On her last day at the cabin, Maya woke early and walked down to the beach one final time. The sun was just rising, turning the ocean gold. She stood at the water's edge, waves washing over her feet, and made herself a promise. She would not forget what it felt like to be drowning. She would not forget what it felt like to choose between medication and food, between paying rent and buying groceries. She would not forget the weight of impossible choices, and she would spend the rest of her career making sure other people did not have to make those choices either. Whether it was helping patients through the fund or mentoring young nurses or advocating for better systems, she would use her experience to make things better. One person at a time, one moment of kindness at a time. That was all anyone could do, but it was enough. It had to be enough. Maya drove home that afternoon, the cabin growing smaller in her rearview mirror. She felt renewed, not fixed. Some wounds took time to fully heal, but renewed. Ready to go back to work with purpose instead of just obligation. When she got home there was a package waiting outside her door. Inside was a framed photograph of Samuel and Evelyn from their wedding day, both of them young and radiant and full of hope. A note was tucked inside. Maya, Evelyn would have loved you. She always believed that kindness was the most important thing any person could offer. She was right. Thank you for everything you have done and continue to do. Thank you for helping me honor her memory in a meaningful way. The world is better because you are in it. Samuel. Maya set the photograph on her small bookshelf between pictures of her own family. Samuel and Evelyn, smiling at each other across the decades, a reminder of what mattered, of what endured. That night she made dinner, pasta with fresh vegetables, a real meal, and ate at her small table, looking out the window at the city lights. Tomorrow she would go back to work. There would be new patients, new challenges, new moments when the system failed and people needed help. But now she had tools, she had resources, she had proof that one person's kindness could ripple outward, creating change that touched lives in ways that could not be measured or predicted. The rain had returned, falling gently against her window, but it did not sound cold or oppressive. It sounded like renewal, like the world washing itself clean and preparing for new growth. Maya finished her dinner, washed her dishes, and went to bed early. Tomorrow would come soon enough, and for the first time in years she was ready for it. Ready to face whatever came, with the knowledge that kindness mattered, that compassion was not weakness, that one person in one moment, choosing to help, could change everything. The rain continued through the night, and somewhere across town, in a modest blue house with flowers in the garden, Samuel Hartman sat in his favorite chair wearing his faded cardigan, looking at a photograph of his wife and smiling. "We did good, Evelyn," he whispered to the photograph. "We did real good." The rain fell, the night deepened, and in 1,000 small ways across the city, kindness continued its quiet, persistent work of making the world a little better than it had been. 1 year later, the Evelyn Hartman Care Fund had helped 118 patients in its first year. The Wellness Fund for Healthcare Workers had provided support to 37 nurses and staff members, helping them get therapy, take time off, or access childcare during difficult shifts. Maya had been promoted to a new role at the hospital, patient advocacy coordinator, that allowed her to spend half her time in direct patient care and half her time working on systemic improvements. Her salary had increased, her savings account was healthy. She had moved to a new apartment with windows that did not leak and heat that worked properly. Samuel's health had remained stable. The medication Maya had helped him get continued to work well. He came to the hospital quarterly for checkups, and always stopped by to visit the nursing staff, bringing cookies from a local bakery and words of encouragement. The fund had expanded beyond Pacific Shore. 2 other hospitals in the region had approached Samuel about creating similar programs. The model was being studied by healthcare policy researchers interested in practical, community-based solutions to gaps in care. Rosa Martinez, the first patient the fund had helped, had become a volunteer. She visited patients waiting for assistance, offering comfort and hope in Spanish and English, sharing her own story of how a small amount of help at the right moment had changed everything. On the 1-year anniversary of the fund's establishment, there was a small celebration at the hospital. Samuel spoke briefly, his voice strong and clear. "1 year ago I was lying in a hospital bed feeling hopeless. A nurse I barely knew made a choice to help me. She did not have to, she could not afford to, but she did it anyway because she saw me as a human being who needed help." He looked at Maya standing at the back of the room. That one choice rippled outward. It created this fund. It helped 118 people. It supported 37 healthcare workers. It changed my life and Maya's life and the lives of everyone in this room. He paused. Never underestimate the power of kindness. One act in one moment can create change that echoes for years. After the event, Maya walked Samuel to his car. The evening was cool but clear, the first stars visible in the darkening sky. "Thank you," Maya said, "for all of this, for seeing me, for helping me, for letting me be part of something that matters." "Thank you," Samuel replied, "for helping an old man in a hospital room. For being the kind of person who gives when you have nothing to spare, for showing me that people like Margaret O'Connor still exist in the world." He got into his car, then paused before closing the door. "Maya, the fund will continue long after I am gone. Daniel has it all arranged. It will keep helping people for decades, maybe longer. That is your legacy as much as mine." Maya watched him drive away, his taillights disappearing into the evening traffic. She stood for a moment in the parking lot, looking up at the emerging stars, feeling the weight and wonder of everything that had happened. One choice, one moment, one act of kindness when she could not afford it. That was all it had taken to change everything. Maya walked to her car, started the engine, and drove home through the clear evening. Tomorrow she would return to work,
There would be new patients, new challenges, new opportunities to help. But tonight, she would rest. She would eat a good meal. She would call her parents. She would read a book. She would live her life with the security and peace that had once seemed impossible. And she would remember that kindness was never wasted. That compassion always mattered. That one person, in one moment, choosing to see another human being and help them, that was everything. The world needed that kind of kindness, now more than ever. And Maya Reynolds, once exhausted, and drowning, and barely surviving, was proof that it still existed.